Good afternoon, everyone. Yep. Everybody's got mics. All right. Okay, so welcome everyone here. I think we are here to talk about what happens after click. The industry terminology is this is MarTech, and that's what you would be hearing most often. I think I've got an excellent panel, and we've had a few discussions actually before we headed here. We are going to cover a few areas, but we'll start straight away with just understanding a little bit about MarTech, and I'll address these questions to our panelists, and they'll give us an explanation. I think we'll start with the most basic one, which is if you give me a moment, yeah. So essentially, we'll start with key components of MarTech, and just to make it easy to consume, we've already actually looked at breaking this up into three broad areas. We would look at MarTech as doing attribution, a little bit about warehousing, and execution. So I'll go one at a time on this one, and I'll start with you, Deepak. When we talk about MarTech and we talk about attribution, the role of attribution in MarTech, could you talk us through a little bit about what that means?
That's a very perfect way to start talking about MarTech actually, because I've been doing only MarTech for almost like 20 years. Some of you will probably were not very old when this all started. Google Analytics was launched in 2004. I think I on my own website I put Google Analytics by about 2005. So exactly 20 years, right? So what does Google Analytics do? Attribution, right? So obviously that's the perfect first question to ask when you talk about MarTech. What is the most important thing to do? And after 20 years, I'm still surprised that the most critical and the most misunderstood part of MarTech actually is the web analytics or the app analytics. Not because people don't understand how to read the data, people don't understand how to make sense of the data. The problem with attribution is not understanding data. The problem with attribution is not being able to collect data. That's the biggest problem, and I see a lot of colleagues from the industry who on the agency side, and they will constantly tell you this. Most organizations today have a product team, a tech product team, and of course the digital marketing team or the marketing team. They both have different priorities, and this is what is the biggest problem for attribution, right? Your data layer, your analytics codes go last, and has 5 days to be implemented with no developers, but the design and the color of the carousel has 6 months to discuss and implement. Right? So this is the biggest problem that today plagues MarTech, because the bottom layer is actually web analytics or app analytics. Once you have the data, then you can, one is sell the product, optimize the funnel, imagine a better UI, a more optimal UI that helps keep customers sticky. So that is my short definition of what, if you are doing MarTech, if you're doing digital marketing and want to be more effective and want to measure after the click, where you get better ROI for your ad spends, a happier customer, less funnel dropouts, better conversion rates, talk to your product team. Work better with them. Tell them that web analytics is not just for me, for campaigns of marketing, it's for you as well. So you can improve your app or you can improve your website, right? So that's attribution for me. And it is the foundational layer of MarTech. Even after 20 years, people tend to think like they'll say CDP, they'll say something. A lot of buzzwords around, forget all that. Work on the app and the web analytics first. Because if that data collection doesn't happen, CDP has no data, forget about it, right? So yeah, attribution first, then everything else follows.
Perfect. And I think perfect setup of that is once you have attribution and a good setup you made is then is when your CDP follows, which brings me to the second one, which we called as warehousing. And Moninder, if you would add here, I think very often overlooked, and attribution rightfully comes beginning, but very often overlooked is the nuances that go into warehousing all the data. So if you can just talk about that part of the MarTech stack.
Sure, and
I think you pressed that.
Hello. Yeah. Thank you, Gautam. Hi, everyone. So overall, when we talk about the main topic, I would just come back to the question also, but we are talking about what happens after the click, right? The attribution is the most important part, but it is also like half of the game is also done before the click, right? And we as advertisers, as brands, we are responsible, one, what we are showing to the consumers. Second, who is our consumer? Are we showing the right ad to the right people, right? So there I feel the right kind of segmentation and right kind of creatives are very much needed, where the MarTech overall tools come in place. And we as a group work with a couple of CDPs to get our right segmentation of data, like maybe Blue Conic is one of them. And for creatives, there are multiple teams working with different kind of creative builders. But yes, once the attribution is rightly done, right, and Deepak rightly said that attribution is the biggest game, right? It's very important to understand whether it's how to have the right set of attribution and what kind of tool has to be used. Because what we have realized so far that having the right knowledge of business and the right knowledge of tool accordingly is very important. So for example, for a brand like Traya, which is in the Reliance group, we might not go ahead with an attribution or an MMP which we are using for any other brand, right? Because the business objective is something different, the media objective is something different. We need to have web attribution in a place. We need to have mobile attribution correctly established. We also need to look into what kind of definitions have evolved so far, right? So we talk about deterministic, probabilistic models, but how we are actually getting the entire data at one place, and is it also talking rightly to the CRM data, right, overall? So yeah, overall in terms of data warehousing, once we have the right attribution in place, we work with some of the tools and our in-house tools also, which are more into CDPs and warehousing, talking about CRMs, which helps us in creating different kind of segments. And basis, these days everyone is talking about AI, but AI within the customer retention platforms like MoEngage or CleverTap, it plays a very vital role, reaching out to the right audience at the right time with the right notification or message. And similarly, on the CRM front, having the right kind of data properly segmented so that we can use it for the right purpose.
Yeah, and I think warehousing may sound like a very simple term of just keeping the data together, but it powers what we call execution, which is what you were mentioning, which is anything you do with that data, the segmentation of the data, and then taking it to engage with customers with your stacks for execution stacks. I think that's the critical piece that it powers, and so equally important from a personalization of journeys and funnel attribution. I'll come to our second question from this one, and I think this one is very interesting. I think we've got a panel mixed with agency folks and client side folks, and one of the things that I think more relevant to client side folks is really what part of MarTech should you in-house, which is versus what should you outsource, and it's important to understand the balance of that, and we'll probe a little bit into that one. Kriti, let me bring you in here for this one. I think we talked about attribution, we talked about warehousing, especially in the attribution part. How do you look at what parts of the business should you outsource in that? What should you in-house? Are there any biases that come in from the people who are doing the attribution? Any of these points you could mention upon?
Right. So there are a couple of points here. One is, what is the kind of data you have? So I've been in industries before where you don't have as much of PI data. So it's okay, you can outsource it, it makes sense, The second part comes to when you have, like, if you have health care information, any PI data which could possibly go wrong, so you have to keep that data in-house. The other bit you spoke about was how is attribution done, right? So you have like your 7-day click, 1-day view, you have SRNs who kind of read the data differently, you have programmatic channels, affiliates. So I think it's very important to try and keep a level playing field. whether it's outsourced or it's in-house, the issue very often becomes not being able to measure each and every touch point. And what that leads to is that you will give your last source or last click undue advantage. And in most industries, conversion or whatever you're driving towards isn't a one frequency convert, right? Like you have offline also. I think Deepak was speaking about it, but you have so many touch points with the user, and each touch point plays a certain role. So I think it's very important to also measure what happens before the click and before the last view. So when you ask me about in-house and like outsourcing or staying in-house, I would say it depends on what channels you're running and how have you measured their efficacy before. Whether you have done, you've stopped the source and then seen how your CACs moved and how your journey moved and so on and so forth.
Perfect. And I think I'll also ask Moninder for his POV on this, given what you're doing at Reliance, but especially focusing a little bit on the execution part of it, right? So when we use tools like MoEngage, WebEngage for execution, how do you see that versus managing in-house versus outsourcing in that space?
So working with different MarTech tools specifically within Reliance ecosystem. So firstly, I mean, if there are any vendors, publishers in this house, it's very, very tough to get into the system, right? Reliance as a group, we all are very, very critical and cautious about data. So mostly when we talk about the warehousing and up to some extent CDPs are in-house. But yes, in terms of wherever we feel that there are tools which can help us, get scalability, which can help us doing more of personalization, and something which is new in the in the trends. We definitely outsource that, and there are partners like I said, MoEngage and maybe Zapier and all, right? We closely work with them. So yeah, it's a mix of both. So overall, a hybrid model with us.
And I think pretty much what the panel is echoing is where it comes to first party data, you want to be much more careful and keep it as close to as possible. But in all other areas, you're ready to explore things which will help drive the business. So that's pretty much the way we look at that. I think quickly moving on to third question, and Mihir, I'll bring you in here. I think is obviously key KPIs for MarTech, and the focus is always to improve business. But I'd like to hear in terms of, how do you look at the KPIs for MarTech? So are there uniform, just one KPI? Would you look at KPIs both from a brand perspective and a consumer perspective? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think before I answer that, I'll want to contribute to the previous question as well. When it comes to in-housing or going to an agency, right? While the sacrosanct nature of first-party data is super important, as you guys rightly said. One key aspect for a lot of brands is, are they able to build that capability in-house? Correct? We recently started working with a client, for example, that was trying to set up a data science team exactly for MarTech. It took them 7 months. They couldn't set up the team, right? So that's 7 months of a calendar year or a financial year gone without them actually making progress, right? So when brands sort of decide whether they want to keep this in-house or move out, with the right guardrails in picture, right? They need to really understand, can they or do they have the willingness, or do they have leaders internally who will put that effort to build that capability? Because if they don't, then it sort of becomes an orphaned team that doesn't report to anyone and hence doesn't do anything productive, right? So that's also a perspective. Now I think coming to KPIs, right? So when we were all back learning marketing in school or doing our first internship in marketing, right? One of the first things we learned is that the customer is at the center of everything you do in marketing, correct? Doesn't matter whether it is price, promotion, place, blah, 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 the customer has to be at the center. Somehow, as the nerds have started coming in, right, with me being one of them, we sort of forgot this basic lesson, and a lot of KPIs that we started deciding in marketing became business first KPIs and not customer first KPIs, right? Typically, when you say KPI in today, you jump to the word called ROAS, right? Everybody says ROAS. But ROAS inherently is not a customer KPI. It's a it's a business KPI. It's not even a brand KPI. Correct? It's basically saying, okay, I put in 5 rupees, what do I get? Do I get 10, 15 or 0? Right? Essentially that is what it means. Now, when you start measuring all your marketing campaigns, right? Even at MarTech level, right? From this lens, it sort of gives you a very small picture of what you need to do, right? Because this does not keep the customer at the center. For example, if let's say today, I as a brand build a new app, okay, I've completely redesigned my UI. Maybe my ROAS did not go up, but the time that the user spent on the app went up greatly, right? The user was able to, find what they wanted very easily, right? They were able to view through my content. Maybe I'm a very complex brand, so they were able to watch videos, read everything. Now all this has as much weight as your ROAS does in building brand equity for the next decade. Correct? So if you simplify KPIs to metrics like ROAS, it really doesn't capture all these things, right? Moninder also spoke about customer segmentation. What is important is to have KPI at a segmented level, correct? For example, if I have a segmentation called new users, okay, for new users, a metric like, the time that I've spent on the website is far more important than ROAS. Because I'm a brand that will not necessarily purchase for the first time. But at the same time, if I have a segment called purchasers, right? People who purchase in the last 3 months, then I actually don't care enough of how much times they open my app. What I care about is, are they purchasing the second product? Or is there a cross-sell that I'm doing successfully or not? Correct? So the KPI has to come in the context of the customer segment. If we keep a blanket KPI, it doesn't work out. So today, to sort of cohesively answer this question, while brands are trying to focus on a single KPI to make decision making simple, it's sort of, I think there is a requirement now of a balanced scorecard when it comes to MarTech. The metrics of the balanced scorecard is completely up to the brand, right? They can decide what are the 5 most important metrics. And the way your HR balanced scorecard is, which has different pillars. Here you can have pillars on brand, customer, business, right? And sort of then have individual KPIs across these to have a single number that is a lot more holistic instead of having very simplified answers.
Right, thank you. And I think just for summarizing it, I think when we look at KPIs, we would not just look at brand KPIs, but like you said, look at customer KPIs. But there is also another piece, I think, which the panel discussed earlier, which is sometimes you also have to have KPIs for the data you're collecting. How valuable is that data? How are you using it? What is its ROI for the future? So these are other pieces which are a part of KPI measurement, which sometimes we forget. But when you are collecting that data, there has to be a purpose, and that also needs to be measured in terms of what that purpose is delivering. I'll quickly come to the panel now for a couple of examples, if any, and I think if you could go with this one first, Mihir, from this thing, is a couple of examples of use of MarTech, and then I'll open for the other panel members to give one example or so.
Yeah, sure. A couple of examples on brands that I worked with that I really admire. The first that comes to mind is HDFC First Bank. So they have been working on MarTech with us, I think, for probably 4 years, right? So back then the keyword was hyper-personalization, right? The panel before this was talking about personalization, so maybe a little more relevant in that panel as well. But the idea was pretty simple. I have a credit card, which let's say is a Make My Trip credit card. And if you don't have this credit card as a user, but I can see that you're using my debit card or my bank account to purchase a lot of tickets on PVR, then can I show this credit card to you when you log into my app and web experiences, correct? Or let's say if it's your birthday, okay, and I'm wishing you happy birthday in your emailer, can I pop in saying that, okay, on your birthday you get 1+1 ticket free, right? As long as you use my debit card. This is hyper-personalization. So this was something the brand was very successful in doing, and I think if you open their app, pretty confident that there will be no 2 instances of the app opening right now in this entire group that will have the exact same homepage. Right? So that's the level to which they personalized. Second example would be Decathlon, another good brand. So if you open their app today, they have close to 7,000 products listed. No user is expected to browse through 7,000 products before they make a final purchase call. The idea was fairly clear that from 7,000 can we narrow it down to 10, 15 per user so that the user makes a single purchase. So what they have been successful in doing is understanding a lot of browsing data, right, which is at a cold user level. So let's say today I am a user, Decathlon has no idea about what I am doing. They've implemented a tool called Dynamic Yield, which is a French company. What that tool essentially does is, let's say I go on the web, okay, I select a cricket bat, which is, I clicked on the product image, I go back, I select pads, right, cricket pads, I go back, I select the most expensive basketball that they have, which is a FIBA ball, then I go back. In these 3 clicks, what have I told the engine? First thing I have told is I'm likely male, okay, because cricket is generally a male sport in India. Second thing is I've told them that I am definitely interested in cricket because 2 out of the 3 products I clicked were cricket products. Third thing I told them was that I am likely a high value user because I clicked on a basketball. So now when I go back to the homepage, right, fairly high chance that the banner, the first banner that I see will be customized to the most expensive male cricket jersey, correct? So it leads to better conversions, correct? So this is how, what I found interesting about this is that most brands today are able to do post-transaction personalization because you record that data, but Decathlon was able to do personalization at a cold user level, which is fairly new and path-breaking in this industry.
Got it. Deepak, any examples that you want to kind of give usage?
I don't know if it will be out of the agenda, but let me try, right? So again, what I realized is that, so MarTech, most of you all are digital marketing professionals, I'm sure. Some of you may be on the agency side, right? So when it comes to great examples of MarTech, let me take you the most advanced one, right? When I was in ICICI Bank about a decade ago, I had a very curious question I wanted to answer. Every lead that has come in, how many of them went to the website and did something, and then there is a lead in the CRM, right? And we had some ways even a decade ago to do an overlap, and the overlap was about 20%, right? Today, if you see anyone who comes to a HDFC Bank's website or the app, and then you see this purely acquisition example, and if you want to do overlap with how many of them have put a lead or shown an interest for a product, right? That is about 80%, right? So obviously, post-pandemic, this number just shot up, just went boom, and we could see the data as well. So what does that mean? That means that people first obviously are purchasing a product, so they first explore, they read, they compare with other competition as well. And then when they're convinced that this company's product is the best, they go and apply and put something in the CRM or the lead management system, right? So what does this mean in a very, 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 very surprising way is that now the MarTech system has way more data about a customer's buying journey than even the relationship manager has it. Like some of you may have a relationship, they will call you and say, ma'am, this, that, and the other. We realize the overlap is now so high that the MarTech system now tells the relationship manager what to talk about. And this is not a e-commerce acquisition use case, and that's what actually surprises me. That MarTech has now come full circle because the consumer behavior went full digital, and post-pandemic was a tipping point. Now everyone explores something, and that data is sitting, if it is sitting in a silo in a MarTech system, that's not good for the organization. That has to be now funneled out, and we are doing it now. So if you walk into a branch today in HDFC Bank, every employee has a QR code. So what the employee does is, and the QR code belongs to the employee, by the way. So what the employee says, sir, please scan my QR code. Now with payments, you're all very happy to scan QR codes, right? Behavior has changed. So the customer happily scans my QR code. I'm the employee, and the customer, you're the customer, you scan it. So the CDP is now connected to the QR code and you are part of a segment which says you're looking for a two-wheeler loan. So you want to buy a bike, let's say for example. But the guy on the field has no clue. So the QR code actually scans and pings her profile, and then using a campaign system sends some SMS real time to the employee saying, ma'am was looking to buy a bike, talk to her about it, or insurance, or had a complaint, be nice to her. She was browsing the complaints page. Be nice to her. So this is, MarTech has come full circle. It was marketing technology. Now it is not anymore. It is actually digital technology. And that is a huge learning that I've had recently.
Perfect. And Kriti, I'm not sure if you do biking or not, but I would love to hear any examples that you have of using MarTech.
I think it worked really well for us to understand possible fraud. So essentially, we were able to map like click flooding fraud, essentially last touch stealing. So what we did was we had reports. So that really helped us to attribute like, okay, what was the last click point before this? What was it before this? And so on and so forth, right? So this kind of heavy, deep analysis was only possible because we had a MarTech system in place. And I think, as I'd said, right, like you have so many touch points with the user, it's very easy to forget where, like to forget that there wasn't just one touch point which converted or got the user on your system. So I think that kind of, how much ever you can, but that kind of data analysis really helps you understand the user journey, like online, offline, wherever they're going, like you should know how. So each touch point should stay broadly consistent, but still give the user some extra information and maybe add a touch of personalization if possible.
It's a fantastic use case, I think. It's like antiviruses exist in our day. For virus, we have anti-fraud mechanisms, and most things are not caught a lot of times. And so we, in some cases especially, and I'm sure people who have run app campaigns will realize that fraud is massive in those spaces. And that's where it's very, very important to have attribution there to solve for that. Moninder, I'll come to you for an example, please.
Yeah, I can think of another example where, so I'll just quickly talk about the challenge. I may not be able to call out the brand's name within the group, but the challenge was, we were not able to identify the exact impact of each marketing medium, like TV, what's the impact of it, right? Though there are multiple tools, right? And we had done a couple of things like, how did, for example, asking the customers, how did you get to know about the store, when they visited the store, right? All of that. But with the help of one of the MarTech tool, we were able to identify the exact impact of digital on the customers, right? So it's a mix of MMM and then using AI and then, a lot of other things. So this really helped us out in that specific, region. The data told us that print is not having that kind of impact as compared to digital, right? So we were able to move our budget from print to digital. So overall budget optimization. So these kind of tools, especially in in the planning phase, really helped us out.
Yeah, and very valuable example. I think sometimes when we discuss MarTech, we get stuck in just MMPs or last mile measurements, but there are platforms like ADH, AMC, all these solutions which actually give you measurements from multiple other sources, and you can bring them all together to do the kind of measurement you're talking about, whether it's offline media, offline sales, and all of that. Which brings me to our last question to the panel today, and I think given this space is seeing so much growth and rapid growth, though I think now with 10 years, 12, 20 years down the line when you started, it's not that rapid. It's been 20 years, but I think
it felt like 2 years because it revolved so fast.
Yeah, and I think just in looking a little bit forward in terms of crystal ball gazing, I think we want to look at what are the technologies or what are we seeing on the horizon that are going to impact this space. And Deepak, if I can just get your thoughts on what do you think is currently you're seeing very quickly coming up in the horizon that you need to be prepared for?
I think one thing I'm now learning is that while the low-hanging fruit, most people said, Gen AI, you can create videos, you can create images, you can create copy for your WhatsApp campaigns and so on and so forth. You can create, Insta stories, what have you, right? One thing I realized is that one is, at the previous panel would have spoken about this hyper-personalization. Now, hyper-personalization can be looked at in two angles. One is you generate a lot of content at a very fine segment, right? Hyper personalization. But what I've noticed is people, especially people who are classic marketers, get very discouraged. Hyper personalization segment size is what? 12,000. Yeah, it's a waste of my time, right? Like, so that's a very genuine reaction and a very valid one in my view, right? Hyper personalization means very small segments. But then I think what now the world is switching towards is saying, don't use Gen AI for hyper personalization at a very fine segment. Use it for experimentation. Imagine you have your ad copies or your email creatives in a descending order, and at the bottom you have the lowest performing, lowest CTR, lowest open rates, lowest click rates for, and take this bottom ones, throw it into a Gen AI system, and don't replace the creatives, because you don't know, Gen AI can be crazy also, it hallucinates and so on. Have up for the bottom 10 of your campaign setup, do a 5% test B through Gen AI, and then see if test B is better than the default, right, the control. Right. And now you will notice that with your tech stack that you have today, if the Gen AI is on an API and throw back a creative, this feedback loop will be completely automated. Perfect. So feedback loop, hyper personalization, but on the experimentation side, and then keep on improving the CTR, keep on improving the click rate is what I think is a great one, and everyone can do it.
Got it. And I think just conscious of time so that we can open for questions. I think we discussed as a panel few other areas, and one of them is all around the DPDP and the consent coming around collection of data and all of that, and which is one of the things that will impact. And already I'm sure all the people working here are building systems to capture consent, to make sure that it is all above board. So that is definitely there. But largely, I think the discussion was largely around Gen AI coming across all facets of it. So it's not just attribution. I think we felt you were doing predictive LTVs, all kind of things were happening in this space, and AI's role in that is going up, right? So I'll stop here. I think these were the areas we want to cover. I thought we'll open. We have about 3 minutes. We'll open for questions, and then we can. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, panelists. You've been an excellent panel. I hope this was useful for everyone. Thank you.